And I have a lot of respect for our culture and the growth that can come from this culture. Now, you may hear me often on shows like Coast to Coast AM if you're a late night listener. And there was one thing I want to share with you right up front, and let me tell you that instead of projecting something on a big screen and giving you some nice visual, you're going to get the opportunity to come up here in person and look at all the things I have to share with you. One of the first things I want to tell you about is some top secret spy technology that has come within my access, shall we say. This is something we're going to be delving into much more deeply in our new laboratory. Now, our laboratory is at an undisclosed location because we are going to be dealing with some sensitive things. And we don't want to put ourselves at unnecessary risk. We want to make sure the environment is kept very secure. Some of the things we're going to try to deal with are new energy sources, opening portals to other dimensions, and also looking into some of these technologies that people claim are otherworldly. And if we open a portal to hell, well, so be it, right? I was contacted recently by a woman who told me a really interesting story about her grandfather. Her grandfather was a military intelligence officer, and it was well known amongst his friends and family that he worked in military intelligence for decades. And during that period of time, he always kept it very, very secret, all the things that he was involved with. It is well known that he was in Dallas the day John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And he also was in the Roswell area around the time that the so-called famous crash occurred. Well, toward the end of his life, and I will tell you that he died mysteriously, and then shortly thereafter his wife died mysteriously. They claimed that he was electrocuted and then working on something around his house, and then he went to the hospital, and then there was this strange orderly who came in, and after that he was dead. And then not too long after that, his wife was found dead. Her head was, her brains were blown out, to be blunt with you, and yet the gun was in another room, even though it was said that she'd shot herself. Well, the funny thing about this story is that before he died, he went to his oldest son, and he gave him a box. And he said, I want you to keep this in your possession and do not open this again until I am dead. He did not tell him what was in the box. Well, after the man died, his son opened the box, and here's what he found inside. Now, I must tell you, the contents are now within this box. I don't know if this is the original box or if it was repackaged to be shipped. But one thing that was inside that box was this. Now again, I know some of you cannot see this very well, but you will when you come up here a little later. This is a wristwatch. It has a leather strap. It's perfectly functional. And on the back of it is a microphone surface with various holes around it. And you can clearly see that from the side of the wristwatch, there is a cord that extends that is hooked to an audio plug. Now let me show you how this would appear if it were placed on a man's arm. Simply enough, the wristwatch would be presented on the left arm, and the wire would run up the left sleeve. And it would then plug into a device which was absolutely phenomenal for its time. This little box that could hang around the left arm or the left shoulder within the jacket. Now nowadays, spies have it easy. They get little tiny wireless things. Back then, you had to have some guts to go into a secret meeting with a wire blatantly running up your sleeve and make sure you didn't stretch your left hand out too far. Within this package, we have a wire recorder. Now this is material that actually belongs in a museum. It sure enough does, and that's why this is probably the last time we're ever going to present this publicly. And it's the first time. If you don't know what a wire recorder is, this is technology that came before the tape recorder. Everybody is familiar with how a flat magnetic tape works. This device, however, had a wire that was as thin as a human hair that would work in the same way as an audio cassette recorder. You can see when I open it, on the inside of the device, there are simply 2 reels and a battery compartment, and all of this is German made. This device was so groundbreaking for its time because this was the most miniature wire recorder ever created in the world, known to technological history. In fact, there was a man named Bill Banner, whom I was good friends with, who worked at WLOS for a long time. I showed this to Bill Banner, and he couldn't believe it. He'd been in broadcasting since he was 16 years old. He did not know this level of technology existed in the 1940s and 50s. And of course, this could have been used as late as the 1960s. In fact, I think that the technology during its time would have cost around $15,000 or more, given inflation. Also in this box were other strange microphones. We have some microphones that are a little more familiar today. This is a contact microphone, which has something similar to a little suction cup on one end, so it can be placed on a window or a wall to record things that were being said. We also have some primitive headphones. And they are actually a little more than plastic tubes that can be placed in the ears. In addition to all that, there were 5 wire recordings. And each one of the wire recordings were in a plastic case that was taped up. The son had stored this box in his barn for decades because he didn't know what was in it. He didn't know how sensitive it was. And during that period of time, you can imagine it got cold and hot and cold and hot, and the recordings sort of shrunk and expanded and shrunk and expanded and went through all kinds of wear and tear. And finally, when this was given to me, the woman who had it said, "I want to see if you can translate or if you can transfer any of this material." So I took this to the only man I knew who had a wire recorder, Bill Banner. He died a few years ago. And we spent a long, intensive night transferring one of the wire recordings. Most of it was static. And there was also a noise that sounded something like, which I think is from the recording shrinking and expanding over time and creating these cyclical marks. It was also in fast motion. We did a digital transfer of the audio, and then we slowed it down on a computer. And the few bits and pieces of audio we were able to retrieve were something like this. There is a room where there is a small group of men having a meeting. Now I'm going to release all of this audio in the near future, but I want to release all of it at once. So I'm only going to give you the transcript now of the things that were recorded. In this group of small men who are meeting in a hotel in Texas, one of them says, "I can go just about anywhere in France now." There's more static. Then, over an hour into the recording, somebody else says, you should have seen the look over some of the people's faces when they took the initial test between Shell and British Petroleum. A few minutes later, there was a reference to some dignitaries, and then an explosion, and then 42 pounds, could be maybe a bomb weight, and then a man starts chuckling and he says, he liked to have had a heart attack, he did. He broke out in a cold sweat. Now, I am not certain what to make of all that, but I knew this was one of 5 recordings. So we decided to transfer the other recordings, and Bill Banner called me and said his machine had broken down and he was going to get it fixed. And then shortly thereafter, Bill Banner died. So to this day, we do not have the other 4 wire recordings transferred. But right now, we are going to get them transferred. We are working as we speak. I do not have the wire recordings with me, nor would I bring them here. I don't know what we're going to find. I don't know what we're going to learn. But I got thousands and thousands of emails in a period of days from people who wanted us to give the recordings to them, and we even did receive a great number of threats and warnings saying there are people out there who try to specifically keep this sort of thing repressed. I don't know how legitimate those are, but they did happen. So one thing that you're going to learn from our laboratory this year is what was recorded on these special tapes. And I have nothing more to tell you until that happens about this. But when you are able to come up here, I want you to be able to see for yourself the technology. It's not going to be in a case. I ask that you not touch it, but you will be able to see that it is real, that it does exist. Because I must tell you, I'm leading up to some information that some people have seen in video form on the internet, and they think it's fake. They don't believe it. I wanted to come here and show you some things tonight so you would understand that we're not presenting false information. We have things that are quite amazing, and it's pretty impressive that we're able to do this in Western North Carolina. Story number 2 I want to pass along to you. This is not something that directly relates to our laboratory, but I think you might find it interesting nonetheless.